We have a medical emergency down here in the Moore Center, FSU training room. We have a player that stopped breathing. We're doing compressions right now. We need to get down here right away.
The fact that they ran the player to death. That's what I think. The fact that they ran the player to death.
Has he got a pulse?
There's still a pulse?
Is his chest rising and falling?
Is his chest rising and falling? Yes.
When they got to the north tunnel of the stadium, he became unresponsive. Emergency medical services were immediately alerted, and high-quality CPR was started and was carried out until emergency medical staff arrived.
Which brings us now to the most recent case. Ted Agu died even after the NCAA began mandating testing for and identifying athletes with sickle cell trait, the better for athletic medical staffs to monitor them during periods of exertion. And in this case, those safeguards failed fatally. February 7th, 2014, Berkeley, California. 21-year-old Ted Agu carried the sickle cell trait, and he struggled that day during an off-season training run. Teammates said Agu collapsed while trying to run up a hill, was helped to his feet by teammates, and then collapsed a final time. Head strength coach Damon Harrington and trainer Robert Jackson later said each saw no signs of Agu struggling. Agu's parents sued Cal Berkeley, and the school actually admitted its negligence.
As far as I understand it from the athletic trainers, he was on the back of the cart, he was talking, he was hydrating, he did not exhibit any sort of labored breathing or other signs until they got to the North Tunnel.
This is something that is very hard on all of us, certainly Ted's family, his football family, the entire Cal community. He'll be missed. He's what's good about college athletics and college football in particular. I mean, he was well loved by his players. By our players and his teammates, and as I said, he's exactly what you want from a young man.
And the only thing that's keeping the shards of my heart in place is the fact that he knew that I knew him, that I loved him. He knew every day because I told him.
He's pushed all of us to become a better person outside of football, especially. We don't want to be remembered for just football.
Last week, the university settled that suit for $4.75 million. And it turns out that Robert Jackson, the Cal athletic trainer who oversaw Agu's final workout, was also present 6 years earlier at the practice in Florida where Eric Plancher collapsed and died, just as the attorney who represented the Agu family has also represented the Plancher family in their action in Florida. Ted Agu's parents are Emilia and Ambrose Agu, and they join me now from Los Angeles along with their attorney, Steve Yerrid. Thank you all for being here. I know it's a very difficult topic, and we're sorry for your loss. Emilia, if I can ask you, what do you believe the university's admission of negligence and this settlement, what does that represent to you?
Well, to me, it represents that they failed to take care of my son, who has been working so hard for them for all 4 years he's been with them. And my son has trusted them. They knew very well that if they could have helped my son, then he would have survived. They were not prepared for emergencies. They did not even remember the fact that he has sickle cell trait, even though they knew quite well he has sickle cell trait. So they did not do enough to protect my son or to try to save his life. So that's why they admitted that the negligence was there. Yeah.
Bob, what they did do, if I can interject something, what they did do, unlike the University of Central Florida, which we tried a 3-week trial in Orlando about, what this university in California did do ultimately was the right thing. They took accountability, admitted responsibility, paid the parents at least a sum that was significant. No amount of money will bring that young man back, but more important than the money to the Agu family was the reforms that were initiated. And they undertook those reforms to prevent future sickle cell death and that had not occurred since the Blanchard death 6 years ago. University of Central Florida, on the other hand, which got a $10 million, ultimately it was about a $15 million judgment against it, had $21 million worth of insurance coverage. And they now are still, this is what, 6, 7 years? We're still in litigation with them because they have not taken any reform measures. They've seen to it that the Agu family has not received a dime, not even the $200,000 the Florida Supreme Court ordered at a minimum they were due. They ultimately must have done something to Robbie Jackson because he was the same trainer Mr. Blanchard died in his arms. Mr. Agu also died in this trainer's arms. So I think California is at least an example of what change means and what actions mean versus hollow words. And it's really appalling and shocking that a university would. In fact, Coach O'Leary got a promotion from the head football coach to the acting athletic director. And the only reason he was replaced after Blanchard's death was because I think he lost 8 or 9 games in a row.
Well, so let me ask you about that, though, because you sure. have settled, if I can, Steve, with Cal. You have an admission of negligence. You have a $4.75 million
yes.
settlement. The institution has admitted negligence, but should individuals be held accountable?
You know, I think institutions only work to individuals. So if you want to ask me, should they be held accountable? Mr. Jackson obviously is no longer there. I think he's selling some type of merchandise in San Francisco. I understand the strength coach is still there and the head coach. But that's a decision that Cal needs to make. If they want to take the reforms further, there's a gentleman that I've got to give some acknowledgement to, Dr. Randy Eichner, who was the head medical doctor at the University of Oklahoma. He's been probably the father of sickle cell trait awareness and preventative measures. Those people have been crying out for years and years and years to stop the unnecessary deaths. I mean, these are not deaths that are unpredictable. These are deaths that are, in fact, systemic, predictable deaths if the right things aren't done. You remember on your show, I think you had the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't even dress out one of their sickle cell trait players.
Well, that's Ryan Clark, and he's coming along live, actually, in about 5 minutes. We'll be talking about that, the game they ended up losing. If I could, I'd like to ask Ambrose,
sure.
Ted's dad, how soon after your son passed away did you begin to believe that the initial cause of death, which was sudden cardiac arrest, HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, was not the actual and correct diagnosis and cause of death?
I think we know from the beginning, and the university tried not to admit that. But the reason why we bring this case is to expose what happened and to make sure that this type of thing will not happen to another parent. It is very difficult on us.
Yeah, Mr. Agu is from Nigeria, and you know that Agu happens to mean lion. So what their goal was when they called me and a lawyer I really respect a lot, Jeff Murphy, who worked hand in hand with me along with J.D. Dowell and David Dickey and Brian Panish out here and Robert Glassman on the West Coast. We all worked for one purpose, and that is to prevent the deaths. The money was a secondary goal. But I think what's important for you to really convey to the viewers is, how many warnings do you need? How many young men have to die before the NCAA has made mandatory protocols? Adherence to those protocols stops the deaths. I mean, non-adherence causes the death. So it's a pretty simple thing, Bob, but it sure is heck become a very costly and very tragic thing.
Emilia, if I could ask you, at what point in raising your son, was he diagnosed? Were you alerted as parents of the fact that he carries the sickle cell trait?
I did not know that he has sickle cell trait. I don't know. My child has never been sick or shown me any sign of anything like that. I've never gone to the doctor that told me that he has sickle cell trait.
Well, the university, ma'am, had identified him as having it. So when the university had identified him, did you then learn as parents when the school had identified him? Did they told you?
No, the school did not tell me.
Bob, can I address that? Because one of the things about reform is these reforms are important. No more punishment drills. No workouts can be conducted when there's no direct line of sight to all athletes, including the sickle cell trait athletes. There are mandatory counseling sessions that California and all 11 campuses has now employed, which require the student to sit down with the team doctor, acknowledge not only the sickle cell trait presence, but the symptomatology so they can get a heads up on what's coming at them. And what's also important is there's a clearance process now that's in place, which requires sickle cell trait athletes, along with all other athletes, to engage in drills that aren't surprise drills, that have been run by the training staff, run by the medical staff and the coaching staff to ensure that crazy things don't happen.
Steve, if I could just follow up, though, if Emilia is telling us that the school had identified their son as being a carrier of this trait, but the family was not identified.
Well, you know, all that goes away when there's a written document that everybody signs. There's a lot of controversy about after the deaths, who told what to whom. But we can tell you there was no policy in place that would verify that the parents were told. And I can also tell you very candidly that the Plancher family was not only not told, but Eric Plancher took the field never knowing he tested positive for sickle cell trait twice.
Yeah, that's part of our reporting of the past. We should note, by the way, for the record, we did invite Robert Jackson to be a part of today's program. He declined our invitation. Emilia and Ambrose Agu, thank you for being with us again. Our sympathies for your loss, and Steve Yerrid, appreciate your time today. Thank you. Outside
Bob, thanks
the Lines.
for your time, and thanks for exposing this awareness.
Thank you very much.